All we did was visit people, give Bible studies, and heal. That's all we did.
Heal?
Yeah, heal. And there was one person out of all the people that we saw, there was only one person that we did not heal.
Like, what would you do? Would you just pray over them? If you want to live a life worth living, you've got to have a purpose. For a lot of people, that purpose is have a great career, have an amazing job, raise kids. For the Christian, though, it becomes a little bit harder because your purpose is not just to do something good or great in this life, but you've also got to have the purpose of achieving immortal bliss. And that, for a lot of young people, it's a hard thing because you've got to have these two elements as you navigate your life. Israel Ramos stopped by Wachita Hills College, and I was very excited when we were able to talk with him about this very idea. So here's our conversation recorded on the campus of Wachita Hills College. Okay, so how did you meet the Lord, and what was the situation surrounding your conversion experience?
Yeah, I think, there's sometimes when you have a moment, boom, my life has changed forever, that kind of thing. I don't know if I had one of those kind of experiences. I definitely do have experiences in my life prior to me giving my life to him that it was like, I know this is for the rest of my life, things are going to be different. But I think it was a longer, more drawn out process. I grew up Seventh-day Adventist, my whole life. I was baptized at a very young age. The pastor at my church invested in young people. He actually just passed away a couple of days ago. And I've been able to kind of reflect on the significance of his influence in my life, which was very, very big. But at a very young age, I loved the Lord. Because of that pastor, I wanted to be a pastor myself.
Wow.
Made that decision when I was like in second grade. We moved from downtown Los Angeles to Riverside, California, Riverside, California. Later on, we ended up moving closer to Loma Linda, the Loma Linda area. But we moved there because of my dad's work. He was a truck driver, and it became an easier transition there. A lot of things happened. That's a whole very long story, but we transitioned there. We went to public school. My brother and I both went to public school. When we transitioned out, my parents bought a home, and there wasn't an Adventist school that was affordable nearby. So we went to public school. It was in a safer part of town now. So all those different things take place. I think things began to go downhill for me at that point. We were introduced to, the influences of the community and that sort of a thing. And, I went through a phase of rediscovery, whether I was an American or a Mexican, and all of these different things are taking place. So I want to go back to my roots. I want to become a hardcore Mexican and hang out with my own people. I'm not American anymore. And that led me into kind of like the gang scene and all that stuff. Got into some trouble. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I did something that got me in trouble. I graffitied the guy's bathroom at my school, and I wrote all over the walls. And somehow someone told on me, and so the police came. They were looking for me.
Oh, wow.
And when they were looking for me, it just is like a movie. It just so happened that just like right as they're going to catch me, the day ends and I leave school and I have no contact with police.
Wow.
This is on a Wednesday night, and I go to prayer meeting with my dad, which was something that I was not interested in prayer meeting, none of that stuff. So I go to prayer meeting with my dad, and on the way home, we're driving down the highway and I see a sign, a billboard that says prayer changes things.
Wow.
And so that was definitely a moment. I think that was probably like the beginning of the first time that I can remember when I was in a time of desperate need, when I said, God, if you're really out there, I need you right now. Like, whatever. And I said, get me out of this thing, please. Anyways, I get to school the next day and I get arrested.
Wow.
I got caught, I got arrested. And so that started, I guess that's the time God got my attention. I started making some small reforms. I stopped graffitiing after that. I started making some small reforms in my life. That was I was in seventh grade, went to eighth grade, kind of got my life somewhat together. I didn't do as many dumb things as I did before.
How old were you then?
when you're in 7th grade, I mean, I don't know how old I was. I was maybe 12.
Okay, wow, so pretty
Yeah,
young.
I was
Wow.
young. Yeah, maybe 12 or not 13. I don't think, maybe 13,
Wow.
12 or 13, I guess. And so then I'm in public school, go to 8th grade. I'm finishing up, and now I want to do something. I kind of want to invest my time in sports and that kind of a thing. Sports were a big thing in among my friends, and so I wanted to do that. So I wanted to go to public high school to be able to get on a sports team and do that thing. My brother was also going through his own things in life, and really because of my brother and the older kids in school or in the church, our parents approached the pastor. They said, "You need to start a school. We're losing our young people. You need to just start a school." The pastor of the church, he's a strong visionary. I mean, within 1 year, the guy starts a school in the church youth room.
Wow.
Buys a bunch of computers, gets homeschooled curriculum, and then he brings in Chester Clark, who is, fresh out of college. He comes in and he becomes the principal teacher of the school.
Wow. Did he know Chester Clark from before?
He knew his parents because he pastored his parents, and he actually encouraged his parents, Mr. and Dr. Clark, Mrs. Clark and Dr. Clark, to come to Arkansas to do Darke County evangelism.
He was the one.
Yeah,
Wow.
as far as I understand. So that was the connection. So he calls on the Clarks to get Chester Clark, the son, the third, to come there. We called him Mr. Clark at that time. He comes in, and he's the guy. I think he was maybe 20 or 22, anywhere between 20 to 22. I mean, he's very young. He's brilliant. I mean, he's a genius. I mean, the guy's very, very smart. He can do every, like, what I remember about him is he could do everything. He did everything with a tie. He'd do mechanic work, didn't get any oil. I mean, he was just
very professional.
Yeah. Anything that you needed, he could do with a tie on and his dress shoes.
Wow.
We played football together. He was with his dress shoes, basketball, wearing his dress shoes. And it was kind of funny to us because it's like, why is he always dressed up?
Yeah.
But how come he can do everything? This guy's like MacGyver. So he came in and that really began to transform my life. I saw him very different from who I was, in every way, shape, or form. Where he comes from, how he looks like, his background, my background, everything is different. Like very, very opposite. Yet I was drawn to that. I was drawn to his influence. And so I think that's how everything kind of began. I was drawn to his influence, which the Lord was using, and he, after his year there teaching 1 year in California, he moved back to Arkansas. I came along. Getting here was in and of itself something super crazy.
Wow.
But that was essentially that was a very long answer, but that's essentially, in a nutshell, kind of like the beginning of God changing my heart to want to surrender to him full time.
Wow. How did you go from graffitiing bathrooms to coming to Arkansas? That's a pretty big change. What was the thing that brought you from California to Arkansas? Yeah,
to this day, to be honest, I really don't know. I wasn't thinking, probably. That was the thing. I was not processing enough, in life, which is the Lord used that. Like I said before, the influence of Mr. Clark at that time was probably the greatest pull. And it had some challenges. We came and we visited Arkansas during the summer. A friend of mine and I did, and we saw the school. It was pretty much the cafeteria. We had a little white house. Have you ever seen pictures of the house?
No, I haven't.
It's a white shack. It was, no insulation, the walls. You can see your breath in the morning.
Wow.
It was an interesting house. It was
That's
funny.
where you would say that was the dorm?
That was the guy's dorm. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We had an out-of-tune piano, which you'd appreciate since you're a musician, but
they still have one in the guy's dorm. It's still out of tune.
They're all out of tune.
No, they're all out of tune.
No, well, this one was on a different level. Even a non-musician would be like, this is a horrible piano. It was a small school. And so many things about it were just kind of, you would think to yourself, if I thought about this long enough, I would have convinced myself not to come. But something about it, I don't know what it was, just said, this is where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
obviously it was the leading of the Holy Spirit, but I did not know that at that time. And I filled out the application at the Clark's house. I still remember the bedroom that's closest to the front of the house. We had 2 bunk beds. I was there, filled out the application, and I remember wrestling with God. It was my last $20 bill, before I went home, and I remember that night I had a conversation with Dr. Clark and Mrs. Clark at the dinner table. They said, we're full. And I had to think about this because I'm like, should I give up my last $20 to apply to a place that I know is already full? Like, is this even smart? $20 was worth a little more than it was now, but I did. And yeah, I went back home. I didn't get a response. I remember my mom coming in through the front door, and she said, almost word for word, Israel, tomorrow we need to start looking at public school.
Wow.
And as she's walking in through the front door, she just got off work. She's flipping through the mail. She's like, oh, you got a letter. And I opened up the letter, and it said something to the effect, we're full in the dorm, but we're allowing you to come stay at our house.
Wow.
And so that's how I got here.
At their house. Wow. I've talked with them, and they have a true missionary spirit. They really care about people.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. So fast forward, you end up helping to start GYC. What was the thing that happened in between being at OH and GYC? What was the major development that took place there?
So just think about Washita. We're in the middle of Arkansas. Like we don't even have cell phone reception. I haven't checked. I can't check my emails. I have no work to do, right? Because I can't access the world. So we're in the middle of nowhere. Out of all places, not like Amity's like a prestigious place to be.
No.
The Clarks, in and of themselves, they're very accomplished people, but they're very unassuming. You don't ever hear like Dr. Clark or Mrs. Clark really promote themselves. No, they're not that kind of people at all.
Always in the background.
Yeah, always in the background, which is crazy because a marketing specialist would tell you need to be at the forefront. Like, you will attract who you are, and so you have to really go out there and be aggressive. They're not that kind of people. They're cautious people. When I was here, the reason why we had so little, in terms of buildings and stuff was because of debt. They didn't want to go into debt and all those kind of things. So they're very safe people. Mm-hmm. And so the school is, we're running the school out of a cafeteria in this, it's a very, the space itself is nothing to boast about.
It's quite primitive. Yeah.
Yet if you take the time, they call it silent talent. I don't know if you're familiar with the silent talent. It's the person that doesn't come across as though they're a strong leader, but if you sit down and talk to them for a little bit, you're going to see this person is a very strong leader. Mm-hmm. If you sit down and you examine what's going on and you observe what's happening here at Washita, you actually see an incredible amount of radicalness. Think about the very first, you drive onto the campus, the very first thing that you see
That's true.
is the logo, right?
Yeah.
The logo has on it a globe, right? The logo is saying, essentially, when you look at that at that logo, you're seeing the globe and the Word of God, which means that why would you have a globe on an academy? This is before even the college started. Why in the world would you have a globe on an academy logo? Normally you're going to have like a book or like a, some kind of a torch or something, but you have this globe. Immediately what it's trying to tell you is Washita Hills is not an end, but it's a means to an end.
Wow.
The world is where we want you to go.
Wow.
We're preparing you to reach the world from this little dinky place. You can even find Amity on the map. Back in the day, it's like, how do you get to Amity? I was laughing because when we landed here in Little Rock, I typed in Washita Hills Academy and it gave me directions here. And I was like, this is funny because in the past we used to use the paper maps. You couldn't see Amity, so you had to put like, take me to, not Hot Springs, but Arkadelphia. Yeah, Glenwood.
Yeah.
So how in the world does this small little town a college and a high school that is, it starts off in a cafe, really in the home of the Clarks. How does it have such a radical vision to like inspire like young people to reach the world, right?
Was that logo there when you were here?
It was created, towards the end.
Wow.
Yeah, it was created. So I think the class after us, or a couple classes after us, donated that logo.
Wow.
That speaks to my second point. Who in the world has a student develop a logo for I would never do that.
Official thing.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to get a professional to do that.
Exactly.
But you have this class, it's in charge of that. The academy, the girls' academy dorm. That was a senior class gift. I mean, not the dorm itself, but to be able to get it off the ground, the senior class of 96, 95 or 96 or something like that, 96. They went out and they fundraised money to get that building built.
The one that's currently here?
Yeah, the girls' dorm in the academy. And it's like this idea that that's the word to summarize that is youth empowerment. You know, only an empowered young person would do that. You know, the fact that you're doing this podcast, you know, all of these different things there, no one told you to do this, right?
No.
Yeah. So all of these different things is like the school, this environment.
That's true. It promotes this atmosphere where you have your own initiative. Yeah.
And you know, you're building buildings here, you're building structures that people live in. You're planting food that the school's dependent on in some way, shape, or form to eat. I mean, all of these different things, they really give a lot into the hands of young people to do, right? I mean, how many people, I did not know of any people my age that by the time they graduated from high school already had been a part of 2 or 3 evangelistic campaigns prior to even entering into pastoral ministry. But that happened here. So I guess what I'm saying is, because when you're here in the woods and in the mountains of Arkansas doing life, everything seems so normal. This is just the way life is.
It does, yeah.
But in fact, if you look at it, it's actually extremely radical. You know, there aren't many places around the world that would do something like this. That's my point. And that the modeling of that, when you're a young person in your formative years, that becomes normal to you. You expect that. It's nothing out of the ordinary. And that's essentially what happened in my case. These kind of things became nothing out of the ordinary. Oh, you pray for money, God gives you money. You know, you pray for this, God gives you this. You step out in faith, God responds. You know, I'd seen hundreds of people be baptized before I even graduated from high school, and I had a small role to play in that. So I thought, I pray and I work, and God answers my prayers.
You're building faith, essentially.
Yeah, you're building faith. And so that muscle of faith building is you're developing muscle. That muscle memory continues to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. Wow. And so GYC was never like a leap of faith where you went from zero faith to just, we need faith and God, you need to open the Red Sea.
It was a process.
Yeah, it was not a Red Sea experience to be quite.
Wow.
It was a Red Sea experience later on later down the road, but it kind of in the beginning, it made a lot of sense. You know, if we pray, God is going to answer the prayer.
Because you had already built that in a process.
He's done it all the way up to this point. And so why wouldn't he do that now? Wow. You know? And so this is the thing, that people challenged that notion. That notion was challenged, you know, like how can you start a youth organization? You have no like business experience, you know, you're not a youth professional, you're not any of these different things. And this is exactly what this is perfect. This is a perfect storm for God to work because you have people that doubt that formula. That's a biblical formula. You have people that are doubting that. And so when God's word is challenged, it must
do something.
It must stand firm. And so now if you're on that wave, you just get the blessing of riding it, right? So that notion was challenged. Who are you to do this? All of those answers were true. We did not have the gifts. We did not have the experience. What they were saying were not false statements. But what we failed to realize was the word of God creates reality. You know what I'm saying? Like when God spoke light into existence, light did not exist before, right? So when God speaks, it actually creates reality. You know what I'm saying? So the understanding of that you realize what is now is not more real than what is in the Word of God. Because the Word of God, not only, it doesn't change reality, it creates reality. Wow. And so we understand reality through the Word of God. And so understanding that, it's empowering.
Do you think that that's the radical mindset that was the philosophical underpinning of this institution and what really enabled you to carry this through? What was the radical thing behind the radical thing?
Yeah. Well, I think, it was modeled. The Clarks would never sit down and tell you, the philosophy of the school is to, this and that,
They wouldn't?
I don't think they never did to me,
Oh.
but they modeled it. They've been here for, I don't know how many years, they've invested all of their money into this institution. They're not becoming millionaires as a result of it. Right. So you see it modeled, it's real because it's exhibit A, it's right there in front of your face. Mm-hmm. It's real because you see them every day of their lives while you're here. So it's not fake. They actually believe in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. They're not getting, this is not a scheme. And so that model made an impression in my mind at a very early age in my life. And I've never forgotten that. And now as an adult, as I reflect on that, I think what they did is crazy.
It is pretty crazy.
And now I'm able to use that model to explain even now my own philosophical worldview and understanding. It's never left.
Can you explain, if you were to put the model in one sentence, what would it be? Is it possible to do that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I could put it within the line of, in a knowledge of God, all true knowledge and real development have their source.
In a knowledge of God, all true knowledge
and real development.
And real development has their source.
Have their source. That's in education. I don't know what page, 12, 14, something like that. Unpacking that statement a little bit. When you know God, true knowledge is obtained. Meaning that if you don't know God, it's impossible to obtain real knowledge. God is a source of knowledge. The Bible says in him is hidden all wisdom and knowledge, right? In the person of Jesus Christ. So when you know God, you then know what true knowledge is. What does that mean? Knowledge for you and for me outside of the worldview of God is obtained by what we see, by what we hear, by what we taste, by what we smell.
Our experience.
Right? Our experience. However, our experience, it's not a real indicator of life.
That's true.
Because our experience is in some way, shape, or form, it's a facade. We live a facade.
And each of us have different experiences.
Yeah, we have different experiences, and there's an element that you and I can never see.
Yeah.
We can't see the angels in this room.
Yeah.
But the angels in this room are as real as you and I are, right? And so if you eliminate God out of the picture, we would never know that there is actually a more real reality taking place right now.
Wow.
Right?
And a lot of times because we can't see, we don't realize that.
Exactly.
Or we forget.
Yeah. Even with a knowledge of God, we forget that, right? But how much more without a knowledge of God?
Wow.
We live life without knowing that God is right beside us, and yet there's this dark curtain that prevents us from seeing him. So reality cannot be defined by our senses, right?
That's really
important. It can only be defined by the presence of God. God defines reality. Second of all, our understanding of ourselves. We cannot understand ourselves outside of our understanding of God. In other words, to the extent that we know God, we know ourselves, right? Because it's like, if you live your whole life within your family and you never leave, and the only person you can compare yourself to is your younger brother, you're going to think to yourself every time you do something, every time you lift something, you're going to think to yourself, I'm a very strong person because I can lift this, but he can't.
And he can't. Yeah.
You're going to think I'm a fast runner because every time I run against my brother, I always win.
It's a poor comparison.
Yeah. So what happens is you need someone greater than yourself to be able to help put an understanding of who you are in place.
And
right?
that's the model.
That's the model. So when you know God, you then know yourself. Now, this is crazy because the foundational truth of God is that he's love at the end of all things, right? Now, that you can test that theory, you can test that thesis all you want, and it will 100% of the time prove true. God is love, always has been, always will be, cannot be anything but love. Now, that notion, when you insert that equation into your relationship with God, you start seeing the power and the beauty of that statement. For example, even though God is all powerful, all holy, all everything, and you're none of that, he still loves you. And even though you're limited, in some things in extreme ways, you have nothing positive to contribute, you actually have excess baggage.
Yeah.
He's willing to use you. This becomes revolutionary to the young person. I mean, it was revolutionary for me, that God would use me, even though I knew what I knew about myself, and even though I knew what I knew about him, that God would use me still. That was revolutionary for me. And in my mind, it gave me a burning desire to say, man, I wish I could love God more than he loves me, but yet that could never be a reality. I wish I could be useful for God. Like, I wish I had something to contribute to God to pay back for what he's doing for me, yet I can't.
Wow.
And that struggle, you say, man, what can I do? What can I offer God who literally gave everything for me, right? That gives you the motivation to do something crazy. Now, you want to do something for God, but you can't because you need God for him to do that, right? And so then I think that whole experience of experiencing the love of God within that context of knowing who he is, and then because you know him, you know who you are. And because you know him, you know reality. In the knowledge of God, all true knowledge has its source. That's a critical component. I hope I didn't go around the world with that, but that's a critical component to understanding reality. That's what you learn here. And then real development have their source, not just knowledge, but development. Unselfishness underlies all true development. That's also found in education. I read education when I was a student here, and I read it every year. Yeah, I read the book Education every single year. Now, true development, when the emphasis there is on true. Development, what's critical about our understanding of development is that it needs to be harmonious. In the beginning of the book, it says, true education is the harmonious development of the mental, the spiritual, and the physical powers. You're a musician, so you probably understand this better than I do. But when you're talking about when you're talking about something being harmonious, it doesn't mean that each has equal parts.
Yeah.
Right? Like true. If the bass is too loud above the melody, it's actually not.
It's not harmonious.
It's not, right? So my understanding of harmony is that every role needs to be played in the right way. Right? Now, when we talk about, typically speaking, when we talk about development, we're talking about the equal development. That's kind of what education now in some of its best forms tries to portray. We need equal development, like the mind is equal to the spirit, equal to the physical. All of these things are equal, but that's not the case. She says it is the harmonious development. What does harmonious development mean? It means that God first is always key. He's the melody. Like, if there's anything that you're going to teach, it's got to be a knowledge of God. Because if you learn anything else outside of the knowledge of God, all of it is 100% worthless. 1 Corinthians 13, though you have gifts, but do not have love, AKA God, you actually, not only are you nothing, but you become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal, right? Something that's annoying.
Because you're missing the model, the standard.
Right. Yeah. And you become counterproductive to society, right? I mean, if there's anything bad in this world or in music, is a cymbal that is being played when it has no purpose, right? It annoys people. Like, I mean, no one wants to sit behind a person hitting the cymbal when it's not part of a beautiful song, right?
That's why I think she says a lot of times that men of genius or talent or those things, they bring more harm to the world than benefits. Yeah. Because they think they're big stuff.
Right. And that's true, right? I mean, we see that in reality. Like the biggest dictators in the world today are a prime example of that, right? They have talent or they have power, but they don't have character.
Wow.
And so when you read education, at the very top of the list of the harmonious development, she says that there's a sequence to education. She says true education does not ignore the value of scientific inquiry, right? Or scientific something else, or literary knowledge. It says, but above knowledge, it values power, and above power, it values character. Character is more important than knowledge. Character is more important than literary acquirements, right? Why? Because if you have power or if you have knowledge, but you do not have character, which is the ability to use ability, then you're going to misuse your ability, right? And so this idea, this concept of real development, breaking that down, it's more than just, that's a loaded statement. Real development, the harmonious development of character above ability and power.
That's all very radical.
It's radical, and yet it's necessary. I mean, the world is dying because of a lack of that.
That's true.
And so I feel that I feel like that's the underlying value of this institution and this organization.
Character above ability.
Yeah. Character above ability. Character or this idea that in a knowledge of God, all true knowledge and real development have their source, and the unpacking of that, the implications of all of that, what that means, I feel like that is the key ingredient, the underpinning, the key ingredient of what essentially spurred the philosophical worldview of global radical impact when it comes to the organization. I think public campus ministry ended up providing kind of like that theological, the theology of excellence and all of that. I mean, it gave it this support in a different direction. But when it comes to Wash the Hills, in my opinion, the ingredients that it gave, the DNA that it passed down to the organization of GYC was what I have just stated, that knowing who God really is the key to anything in life.
You basically take the philosophy of the world, you flip it upside down, because in the world you have ability, and then you have all these other qualifications. And if it's even on the list, you might have character. So you take that, you put character on the top, and then you get what spurs this radical movement. So when you were thinking of starting GYC, were you thinking of, you mentioned something about global impact, about making this radical idea for the Lord, but were you having ideas of grand scale? Did you have a vision for a grand?
Not while I was here. Like while I was at Washington, like GYC was essentially a joke. It was
a joke.
Yeah, it was something that we were making fun of my situation. It was just
they were making fun because you had the idea.
Yeah, the idea itself was a joke. I wasn't like, it was a fake organization that I was joking about that I was going to lead in some way. But I just, it was all of that was in jest.
Wow.
And I don't even know how it stayed as a joke. Like it was a 2-year joke. I mean, this thing went on forever and ever and ever. And everything was, as a matter of fact, this Bible, how old are you?
19.
Oh my goodness, you're a little child. This Bible's older than you. Like this Bible I got in 1997.
Yeah, I wasn't born then.
Yeah. So this was a gift. This was a gift from my friends to Academy.
While you were here.
While I was here. And this is the HMS Richards Bible. Chester Clark had an HMS Richards Bible.
Can you raise it up a little higher so the camera can see it?
Yeah, this is it.
Wow.
It's gotten a little bit beaten up.
It's historic.
But here, I got encouragement from my classmates, the 2 Jessicas. And all of this was, they're kind of like, hey, you're going to be preaching a week of prayer, so you can use this. This is a gift that fits you, because I was talking about so much. I was infatuated with the HMS Richards Bible just because Chester had it.
Can I see it?
Yeah. And it's cool because it doesn't say Holy Bible on it. It's just like simple black. It's not shiny.
So this didn't wear off anything? No, it was like this?
Yeah. The only thing that wore off was in the spine. It had
something.
But fits in your hand nicely.
Wow, it really does. It's not too small or too big.
Yeah, right. Not too small, not too big. And so that, everything revolved around, dude, I'm going to send HMS Richards Bibles around the world. I'm going to preach from that Bible. This is going to be the IR Mission Foundation is going to be distributing these Bibles. And so that was kind of like the running joke. And so they gave me this kind of half as a joke, half as because I needed a Bible. Yeah. So there was no real, like there wasn't like a real concrete vision of,
No serious why.
yeah, no serious approach to what's going to happen in life. Now,
But you did, just to clarify, you did have a solid relationship with the Lord. It wasn't like your whole life was, I'm going to do whatever.
I
You
wanted
did.
to serve him. For sure, I
Yeah.
wanted to serve him.
Yeah.
you
But
know?
this idea of the grand was just a joke.
Yes. Like the idea of starting an organization, it was like definitely a dream,
Sure.
but it was also a joke. It's not like, like, yeah, I genuinely wish I could be the president of the United States, but that's not going to happen. Right. So I genuinely wish I was a millionaire, but that's not going to happen. I know it's not going to happen. And so because it's not going to happen, you start joking about it, like, hey, when you get $1 million, make sure you give me some money, that kind of thing. And so
kind of thing, yeah.
that's how it went for 2 years. Like they for my senior class gift, senior recognition, they gave me a bowl to collect offering. It's like, look, when you start your IR Mission Foundation, you can use this bowl.
Did everyone get one of those, or was it just you because you're joking?
No, everyone got some kind of a gift, but that was
was yours.
Yeah, that they gave me.
Wow.
And so what's crazy is the only thing that survived from all that was just the logo.
Tell us about the logo.
Yeah, the little logo. It was for the IR Mission Foundation. We had I don't know why, because of my graffiti background, I needed to write on something. So I drew a little man with just the marker, it was just scribble. The whole thing was scribble. And
can you draw and hear how it was?
I need a nice marker, but
I don't have a marker. I have a pen though.
Yeah. So essentially it was, this was the head,
Uh-huh.
and then that was the arm. And then you had the little guy right there. And then boom, that's the Bible. So that was like the logo. And then it'd make an R out of that. And then,
IR. Oh,
Yeah.
now I see it. So it wasn't the Y. It was an I.
Right. So it was an I. That had to have been an I. And then what ended up happening was later on, like way later on. So when it's all about opportunity. Yeah, it's all about opportunity. So what ended up happening was I did a week of prayer at my home church, and Chester came along. The guy, by the way, he was like a world evangelist. So
By like what, 22?
yeah, I mean, now he's probably got to be maybe 24, 25 by this
24,
time.
25.
But he's definitely like, he's traveled, extensively preaching all over the place. And I asked him, hey, can you come do a week of prayer with me? Like, and he's not even like the main guy. It's like, I'm the main guy and he's kind of like my supporting cast. And he pays his own way.
Wow.
And I preach more times than he does, which now as an adult, I'm thinking like, what in the world was I thinking,
How many years younger are you than him?
I don't know. I mean, I'm 42. So I'm probably 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 21, 22, maybe, I'm guessing maybe 7, 8 years.
Okay.
But he's my teacher.
Sure.
Like the guy's
mentor.
He's my teacher. He's my mentor. I mean, there's even the gap in terms of maturity and experience is much larger than the actual age gap. You know what I mean? I mean, he had a lot of experience in life and in preaching and whatever. So he comes along. We had a week of prayer there. And after that week of prayer, I was like, I want to do this again. Wow. And so we had conversations about doing this again. And he was kind of like more supportive, like, hey, I'm willing to come again and do this with you again, iron it out, figure things out, let me know and I'll come. And every once in a while he would say, hey, how's it going? Are things coming along? And then all of these different things are happening in life. And so I started talking to him. I'm like, what about if we grew this beyond my church? Like maybe we can grow this to try to maybe expand a little bit.
How long was this after the first prayer meeting?
This is probably the year after.
The year after.
Yeah, so this is 98. This is like 99.
Okay.
And we're talking about maybe expanding this a little bit more. Now I'm in college. I go on a mission trip to the Philippines. I took like a gap year off, go to the Philippines, which he's coming to do an evangelistic meeting there. Crazy experience. I mean, we had crazy experiences there. Like 300 people were baptized.
Wow.
I was essentially doing like Bible work for 3-4 months before he came with another friend of mine who was a Washita graduate as well. But we saw like I felt like I was a disciple, like a legit. I mean, it was like,
Legit disciple.
yeah, like we wake up in the morning and we were like walking down like these, villages in the Philippines and like legit miracles. Like I can't even begin. Like that's a whole nother hour. Like
discipleship, miracles.
yeah, like this, like you feel like anything that like we were there for 3 months from morning until dark, from light up, sunrise to sunset.
Huh.
All we did was visit people, give Bible studies, and heal. That's all we did.
Heal?
Yeah, heal. And there was one person out of all the people that we saw, there was only one person that we did not heal.
Like, what would you do? Would you just pray over them?
Yeah, we prayed over them. We did some crazy stuff like charcoal poultices. we did some of the stuff we did. We should actually end up killing people, but
you really got the radical from here.
It was like crazy stuff. We had this book that was called like Home Remedies, and we would just like open it up and see like, all right, like someone's having a heart attack. All right, let's do a poultice on the heart. I mean, it was like, that never happened, but it was some stuff that clearly it was like a miracle of God. Later on, I actually have a picture that popped up. I think I might have it on my phone actually. I was cleaning out some stuff and I saw this picture and I sent it to a friend of mine who's a dermatologist.
From the Philippines. The picture was
from the Philippines. Yeah. And he's like a solid, I mean, this guy's a solid world, class, dermatologist. And so I sent him a picture. This is not it. This is.
He was a little bit shocked.
This might be a picture of my ankle.
Did you hurt yourself while you were there?
Yeah. Oh, this is it right here. All right. Look at that. So I don't know what kind of skin condition is that, but that lady had that skin condition for a long time.
Wow.
So we put like onions. We put onions on those open wounds.
You put onions on those open wounds?
We did like an onion poultice. We like got onions and chopped them up and then wrapped them in like
Was that because that was the only thing you could get your hands on?
Yeah, that's all. Like we did not know what. Like we were just doing dumb things. Like we clearly did not know what we were doing. So we did this, and we would pray the daylights. I'm not. This is not a prescription. I'm just telling you what happened.
It's it's descriptive, not prescriptive.
So we just did it, and then that thing cleared up. I mean, it was like baby skin. Like you could not, no scar, nothing. You never even saw that it existed before.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy stuff. And that happened like over and over and over again. This guy had a hole in his face. You can see, like if you pull his cheek, you can see inside his mouth.
What?
Yeah, and then we put Neosporin in it. And then it just completely healed over time. Like there was no scar, nothing. Just like baby skin, just all the way, like nothing ever happened.
So you would do this and then pray over them, and then
we pray. I mean, these people became Adventists. They got baptized.
Wow.
But I mean, we're seeing healing. This. Yeah, we're seeing this stuff over and over and over and over again. And it was crazy stuff.
How long were you there for?
We were there for 3 months.
3 months, and all this happened.
All this happened 3 months. I mean, I'm telling you, like there was one man that asked for healing that we were not able to heal, but every other person, like 100% of the time, people being healed.
That is radical. You don't hear of people going places, healing people, praying over them.
I'm telling you, like the more I tell the stories, the more time passes by. There have been times where I wondered, like, did that really happen, or did I have a dream about that?
It was for real.
Yeah, it was. And then the picture comes up, and I'm like, oh man,
wow. So no wonder when you started GYC, it wasn't that. I mean. Yeah. Now that you look back, it wasn't that radical.
This. Yeah.
GYC, so it was after that.
Yeah. GYC was right after this, actually.
So it's less radical in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It was right after this. This was 1999. Uh-huh. I went to I did a year at University of Michigan. That was in 2000, 2001, 99, 2000, and then after that we just kind of started making plans for it, and it just kind of took off. And when it started, GYC, she's now my wife, but she was my girlfriend then. I was like, hey, I want this logo. Mm-hmm. And then, so
Was it still the IR?
yeah, the I man.
I
And so what she said is like, let's get rid of the R, and then we'll just put a C there. We'll just put a G there. And then we made the Bible. We couldn't get a small Bible. So they were like, let's get a big Bible. So,
because you originally had just the Bible on the, what is it, the left hand?
yeah.
Yeah. Where did she get the G and C from?
So actually it was like word art or clip art. Do you know what clip art is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was clip art on like Microsoft Word or whatever. So she printed off, like she would print off a G, pass it to the printer, put a big space, a C, and then made a big Y, put that through the printer. And then, so instead of the man, obviously we just got a Y, and then she printed the Y, and then she just drew a circle.
Oh, wow.
She just drew a circle there, and then we got a clip art Bible. And our book. It wasn't even a Bible, it was just a book. And then she put that there, and then a couple years later we got a real graphic designer.
What years were you using these computers? This was
2002.
2002. So it was pretty primitive stuff.
Yeah, it was primitive stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
It was 2001, 2002.
So you have the idea. When did you I have this book here? On the back it says, with good to great, Mr. Collins delivers two seductive messages. That great management is attainable by mere mortals, and that its practitioners can build great institutions. It's just what us mortals want to hear. And so he gives the idea here. Actually, got the little quote here. It says, good is the enemy of great, and that is one of the key reasons why we have so little that becomes great. We don't have great schools because we have good schools. We don't have a great government because we have a good government. Few people attain great lives, in a large part because it is so easy to settle for a good life.
Yeah.
When was it that you first read this book? And I'm sure when you first read it, you were like, oh, good is the enemy of great.
Yeah. I mean, I never really read through the whole book. It was just in vogue. It was very famous when it was published. So when it was published is when I started reading those quotations. I never read the book cover to cover, but it was kind of like the new thing that people were using for organizational leadership and that sort of a thing. And to a large degree, that's true. You know what it's being said.
It was published in, let me see here, 2001.
Yeah.
So that was right when GYC was getting started.
Yeah.
Isn't radical great in a sense, though?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is true and not true at the same time, in my perspective. It is true in that there's a biblical principle that excellence is a moral obligation. You know, I mean, think about the life of Daniel. Daniel, the whole government, the greatest government of his time wanted to kill him. And they did everything to find something wrong with him, and they could not.
Wow.
I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, it wouldn't take very, very long for them to find something on me. You know? I mean, it's like the excellence that Daniel had was on a very different level.
So is the excellence that you're talking about part of the good or the great?
I think it's different from that.
It's different from both.
Yeah, because they're saying greatness. So in a sense, good is the enemy of great in terms of that we settle. We don't achieve what we could achieve because we settle for what we can't achieve.
Like mediocre.
Yeah, we settle for good enough, you know? So why? Because greatness in this, what he's saying is it's hard to, it takes determination, it takes discipline, it takes all of these different things, right? And so we tend to settle for good enough.
Good enough.
Right? Now, so in a sense, yes, that's true. Excellence is not necessarily greatness. You know what I'm saying? So, for example, places like this, Washington Hills, I mean, we're not dealing with $1 billion, even $1 million endowment fund. We're not, you know, from many perspectives, this would not be a great institution.
Rice and beans.
Yeah, right. That's what what you're eating for lunch today is not gourmet meals, right? Some institutions have their own chefs, right?
Yeah.
And
it's healthy. It's just
right?
Nothing
Yeah.
fancy.
And so from depending the standard that you use to judge this will kind of tell you, what philosophy you have for organizational growth. And so excellence does not always look the same in the eyes of God from the eyes of man. Sometimes it does.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it looks the same.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah, like for example, Daniel. Like Daniel was great in the sight of God and in the sight of society.
That's true.
So, but he was also a slave. So you can see the complexity of how God works in the life of Daniel, right? Joseph, another key person. Joseph went from being a slave to being the second greatest of the greatest nation in the world at the time. No one would ever have chosen the path that he chose or predicted that path is going to lead him to greatness. You're thinking the path that he's on is leading him to death.
Mm-hmm.
God is saying, actually, no, I'm actually preparing. I mean, can you imagine Daniel in jail? Why are you here? Well, I'm getting ready to rule this country, right? It just doesn't work. And so excellence sometimes in the eyes of God and the eyes of man, it looks the same. Sometimes it looks very different, Now, the idea of striving for greatness is not a biblical, for the sake of greatness, is not a biblical philosophy. You look at the life of Christ, he goes low, 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 right?
And that's the hard thing because everything around us says you can do this, you can be great, right? At least as young people, everything that we see is like, the society pushes at you. It's either two extremes, like you're horrible or you can do anything you set your mind to.
Yeah. And both things are true. Ellen White herself says, what, dear youth, what are your greatest dreams? I forget, it's been a while since I've read it, but essentially says, you can strive to, the
ambitions that you can't express.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question is, that is greatness, right? And that is appreciated by heaven and something that we should strive for. But greatness for the sake of greatness is something that does not jive with the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. If I want to be great just because I want to make a good name for myself or because I want to have a great life or because I want to be famous, that in and of itself is, Satan's worldview. I mean, that's what got him into trouble, right? So to make a great organization for financial gain or for popularity or for whatever, which is what normally drives the world today, greatness for the sake of name, that's antithetical to the gospel. But greatness for the sake of Christ, so that Christ can look at, Christ can show you as exhibit A to the world, this is what I'm able to do through someone. I mean, that's powerful.
It is.
I actually learned how to pray this prayer here. I said, Lord, you can teach me humility both through failure and through greatness.
Teach humility both through failure and greatness.
Yeah. Like if you do something, for example, like these things, for example, the healing in the Philippines, everybody knows the poultice did not heal that. I mean, everybody knows that. I don't have to explain that to you. Like, that automatically. As soon as I tell you I cut a piece of onion and put it on there, how in the world did that happen, right? Yeah. And I joke with my doctor friend. I was like, hey, did I discover should I patent that onion, And he said, you need to thank God that it worked, right? That's what you need to do.
It's not normal medical procedure.
It's not going to work. It's clearly a divine miracle that did that, which is funny because whenever I tell a story, people start coming to me for medical advice. I'm like, you missed the point, right? So God can teach us. That was humbling. That was a humbling experience. I mean, I prayed every single morning, God, like you can't abandon us right now. Like if you abandon us, just think about what's going to happen. I mean, so many people are dependent on this for the right reasons, the wrong reasons, I don't know. But it took, it was a humbling experience to be used by God in that way. Just as powerful as if you fail and you're like, God, I really need you. Success and failure can both teach you dependence on God. The prayer that I learned to pray here was like, God, give us success that is so great and so marked that when people see it, they automatically know he couldn't not have done this.
Wow.
And so that's actually been my prayer ever since. I do something, I'm praying to God. I'm like, Lord, give us something so great. Let us be an example of what you're willing to do with people who are, who lack talent and gift.
But it's got to be so great that when people see it, they say he couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Must have been something else,
right.
Someone else.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened in the Philippines and with GYC. You know, I mean, one of the criticisms that people had about GYC was people that were anti-GYC were like, oh yeah, so you're telling me that these young people start an organization they looked at our financials, you know, because they were online, the IRS statements, and like, so you're telling me that these young people got together and then they started, you know, they reached $1 million in 3 years. They're like, yeah, right. Ha ha ha, right?
That's fake.
Yeah. And I was like, the cool thing is that we experienced it. Like we saw it. We're like, man, this is crazy. How do you go from a $6,000 profit to now $1 million organization?
Wow.
This is crazy.
In 3 years.
In 3 years. I never got a penny of that, right? But the experience was crazy, you know? And the Lord answered our prayer, right? Like, yeah, you're right. We could not have done that. Yet it did happen. So what does that tell you? It tells you that God is willing to use anybody to shut up the proud, you know, and to shut up the doubting, right? He'll use a donkey, right? So God can teach us humility both through failure or through success. Why not success? You know? And
that is such a good point. I mean, if God has to teach us some way, why not do it through success?
Yeah.
But the thing is, a lot of people get puffed up. They get a little bit of success, and then it's like, oh man, starting to feel good about myself. What did you do once you achieved success? What were the steps you took, or what was it that went through your mind to, you know, keep you in your place so you didn't get the Nebuchadnezzar experience?
Well, first of all, I left the presidency early on. I left the presidency at the peak of my success.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't stay?
I did not stay. And that's one thing. The other thing is that I was aware of who I was.
Because you had that experience with God, you knew who you were.
Yeah. I knew, like, for example, you know, there's not a long gap. You're like 5 years away, 5 years removed from academy. So I knew everything was fresh memory. People could talk to Mrs. Clark and they could really know this, you know, this guy barely graduated from high school. You know, I mean,
how old were you at this time?
So GYC started, I was 22.
So you would have been like 25, 26?
Right. I mean, yeah. So 24 was, 2004
24.
was.
When you stepped down?
I stepped down in 27.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But there was growth all along. I mean, we were having growth every year, but I knew that in any moment, the organization was still vulnerable. You know, like we did not have a guarantee that the next year people were going to show up. That's how I lived every year. I'm like, we don't have a guarantee that next year everyone's going to show up. It requires, attendance requires a miracle of God every year. He needs to do something. And so that happened. I felt by 2007, personally, I felt like, you know, the organization's at a point where it's easy for everybody. People had gotten comfortable with me as president. You know, the board would never have chosen me as president.
Really?
Yeah. I make fun of them for that. I'm like, you guys never would have elected me as president. The only reason I was president was because I started the thing. You know, outside of that, it's like they never would have selected me. You. Yeah. And so we reached the point where they were comfortable with me as president. And when that happened, I felt in my mind, it's time to move.
Was it because of being comfortable itself? Because you were losing the radicalness that started the thing itself?
I think GYC was still radical at that time. We had solved a lot of challenges, but people were comfortable in terms of the climate was we felt like as an organization, we're out of troubled waters in many ways. We've like survived the storms. We're now sailing nice and easy. We have like financially, we're not desperate anymore. People are coming pretty consistently.
Sure.
Our relationships with other organizations are pretty stable. Everything kind of was settling down, and it was a new era, you know?
So, but why did you step down then? If everything, was it because you didn't want it to be comfortable so it wouldn't breed, so it wouldn't make it, I don't know, lose that?
Yeah, I think it would have been easy at that time. It would have been easy for when an organization starts getting comfortable, then it's
vulnerable.
You're actually most vulnerable, right? When you need some kind of shaking in order to depend on God.
Even more, so it's more vulnerable than when you're starting.
Yeah, success puts you in a more vulnerable situation than challenges.
Wow.
You know, it is the illustration the book Education gives us that it's the big trees that are in danger of being struck in times of storm, not the little plants, right? The same storm that kills the big trees does not harm the little plant, right? And so at that point, you know, when we were in the peak of that kind of success, it felt now is a good time to leave before we get out. I'm not saying we were comfortable, but I'm like, this is where things could go. I mean, to reach a place where the organization felt comfortable with a leader that they probably would not have felt comfortable with earlier on. It's a big milestone, you know, and all of this was in joking and jesting, you know, kind of like, yeah, you guys feel comfortable with me as your president. This is kind of funny, but there was an element of truth to that, you know. It's time to move on. We need some kind of a shift, not because of anything, not because of talent that I had, just because of where we were as an organization. We need some kind of a shift that's going to make us as an organization kind of uncomfortable. And a new leader will do that. Now, we got a very strong leader. We were never, like, the leader that followed me was Justin McNeilis, who some people have said he's the best president GYC's ever had. So it was followed by strong leadership, right? So it's not like it became a vulnerable organization from that perspective, but he was a new leader. And that makes people uncomfortable and
kept the startup mentality.
What
were the most important traits that helped you start GYC, aside from, of course, having a relationship with God? What were some of the most important traits in the development of growing GYC, in your relationships with other people, other ministries? I know you've mentioned perseverance was a big one.
I think the other key thing would probably be excellence.
Excellence.
You know, everything that we did, we tried to do, it was higher than the highest. That was the phrase. We need to be higher than the highest. Everything that we do needs to be excellent.
Quality and excellence.
And in the very smallest details, you know.
Did you think you could be the best? Or
did
it ever cross your mind?
We tried to be the best at everything that we did. We knew we were behind in everything. Like we had no business experience. Like our treasurer did not know no one knew what they were doing, you know. No one knew what they were doing. But we acted as though we did until we did.
You acted like you knew what you were doing.
You know, we met with these people of convention centers, had no idea what we were doing. I mean, we asked the dumbest questions. I mean, it was a joke. But we strove for excellence. You know, the first GYC, I wrote a letter to every speaker. You know, we figured out what their favorite snacks were, and we got them. We put them in the room. We figured out ways to make sure that this was a conference that, as a speaker, they would never forget.
That sounds like some legit business stuff.
Yeah, we did some homework, and then we try to do the same for the attendees. You know, for the attendees, we try to make sure that we presented a conference that was very different from anything that they had ever been to. So we made people dress up for it. You know, it was a professional conference. It wasn't like a laid back conference. We had a crazy schedule, 6 a.m, like 9:30 at night.
Do you think people enjoyed that?
I think it wore people out. I mean, I was tired. You know, I mean, it was crazy. We kind of softened up the schedule after that. I mean, it was too much. But in every way, we tried to present excellence with the speakers, from the speakers all the way down to even the signs. You know, this is before, you know, people had access to Photoshop and all that stuff. I mean, we were doing all these things on PowerPoints. You know, we would get a PowerPoint slide, and then we would print the slide out on a piece of paper, and that would be our sign. Like, hey, make a right here, make a left there. This is the name of the room.
Wow.
So it was all. I mean, we were using primitive means, but we tried to go above and beyond. Definitely very creative and resourceful.
After you grew that initial stage of the joke, after the moment passed, and you were like, "Oh, this is real stuff." What was the key image? I know you've mentioned images before, you know, having a key image of the vision. What was the key image that kept GYC going?
I I think the image would be like a wildfire. Like we knew we lost control. Like we reached the point, it happened so fast that you kind of go to bed, you wake up one morning and it's like, what was just kind of like we had a match, we dropped the match, we started a forest fire.
Wow.
And
you knew that was beyond you.
Yeah. And you knew, our water balloons are not going to shut this thing off. It's like at this point, you're at the mercy of the fire to do whatever it's going to do. It's going to burn whatever it wants to burn. It's not going to burn.
Even if you wanted to stop it.
You can't stop it.
Wow.
And that's kind of what happened. I think at some point the Holy Spirit said, hey, I got this. Watch what happens. And you just kind of, you watch helplessly.
Stand back and see the salvation of the Lord.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm really curious to know about, you've said that, you mentioned this morning in your talk that to be successful, it has to be intuitive. What did you mean by that? What is that sense of intuition?
So intuition is necessary for success in this way, in that you can't have someone telling you what to do every step of the way, right? Like at some point, if you're going to do anything successfully, you have to have a certain skill set that allows you to do things naturally without a checklist, right? You need to be able to reach that kind of expertise in order to be successful, whatever it is that you're doing. You can do checklists up to, when you get a new job, you get a checklist. All right, these are the things I need to get done on a day-to-day basis. But that kind of leader will only do that for a short amount of time. At some point, the kind of leader you're looking for is someone that is able to to master the checklist and to get rid of it and to have that checklist internally run in his mind or her mind. And so intuition is that, right? Like intuition is when you're talking with someone, you know how to do things. You have this idea of how things ought to get done. That happens not just in enterprise, but in relationships, right? You can't have a manual with you as we have a conversation of, if he says this, I'm going to say this. If he says that, you can't have that.
It's going to be really lame.
Yeah, it's not going to work. You need a certain amount of intuition that teaches you how to interact with people. You obtain that intuition, you obtain that skill, I should say, through intuition. You've seen your parents interact with each other. You've seen them interact with strangers. You've seen them, your parents have taught you how to have a conversation with you. Canvassing teaches you through intuition how to relate to people. That was my point, right? That at some point when someone says no to you over and over and over and over again, intuition tells you, I don't like that feeling. And intuition says, you know what? Why don't you try to tweak this and say it this way to increase your chances of success? Why don't you make this adjustment, that adjustment, this adjustment? Maybe why don't you change your attitude? Maybe why don't you smile more? Maybe why don't you try to be a little bit more friendly? Maybe even though you're shy, give an image of confidence. All of these different things. There's not a handbook that says be confident when you're at the door. Yeah. Right. There's a limited training, but you're going to learn the more doors you knock on and the more observant you are, you're going to learn these things by intuition. You're just going to know that. It's just going to somehow miraculously, it's going to just boom, you're going to know it. And that's what I meant by intuition. That intuition carries you a very, very long way. That's a skill that you'll use the rest of your life, and more than you know, it's the universal tool.
You pick up things. Yeah.
It's going to be the universal tool, whether you're at work, whether you're interacting with your significant other, whether you're interacting with your friends, that knowing how to read people, knowing how to push, how to hold back in order to accomplish success or to reach your goal, you're going to have learned that intuitively without paying a lot of money for a course on it. As a matter of fact, making a little bit of cash on the side.
So it's essentially a self-feedback, not a self, but it's a feedback loop that you give yourself.
Yeah, or I think the experience gives you. I don't think you're giving that to yourself. I think the experience is you're learning how to do that through experience, not through reading a textbook,
Not through reading a
but you're
textbook.
learning that through experience, which the reason why it's so powerful is because it bypasses the need to read that, and it becomes a part of your very being. You're not thinking about, like, every time I go to a door for the rest of my life, every time I go to a door, I can't help but immediately know this person likes fishing. Oh, they have a kayak. Oh, they have kids. Every time.
You're reading the surroundings.
You're reading those surroundings, right? And that probably happens more times than I can think about, because it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Not because I want it to happen, just because that's the way I am, right? It's kind of like when you're similar with music, right? You know, like, do you play the violin?
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife plays the violin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's, it always amazes me, like, how do you get the note? Like, how do you know
Where to put your finger?
Yeah, to put your finger,
yeah.
like, you know that through intuition.
Yeah.
If I were to do that, you would have to tell me, no, you got to move it to the right more, all right there. You'd have to tell me that. Now, it would be impossible for me to play a music piece if you had to tell me that for every single note.
So it's intuition that you learn through practice, essentially.
Yeah.
Wow.
You practice. And so now with your eyes closed, on any violin, this is where I push, how I push, the angle that I push to get the sound that I want.
Wow. That's a good analogy.
Right? It's the same exact way with relationships. All right. I know that facial expression, I've seen it 1,000 times. I know that that's leading me to a no. How do I change that facial expression? What do? I need to make them laugh. Right? I'm going to say a joke. I said a joke. That did not work. That joke did not work.
It didn't land.
It didn't land right. That means now my chances are even worse. What am I going to do now?
Wow.
I'm going to go straight for vulnerability. Like, listen, man, I just need cash. That worked. I'm going to get that sale, right? That's going to work the same way with the sale. It'll work the same way with the relationship with someone, right? I'm in an argument. I'm going to try to justify myself. It's not working. I'm going to try to crack a joke if I make her laugh, this will stop, right? With my wife, I'm going to crack a joke. It worked. All right. Emergency averted, right? It did not work. I'm going to go back to vulnerability, right? You know what? I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I was trying to make you laugh because I was hoping it was going to make the situation better. It did not work, obviously, because you're now even more mad. I'm sorry.
Wow.
So if you have to tell me, or if I have to read that in a book,
no, it's not going to work.
My marriage is not going to survive.
No.
Right? I need this to be a part of me. It needs to be genuine, first of all. I can't just say, this guy told me to say this.
Yeah.
I can't say, it's got to be a part of who I am. And it's got to be intuitive. It's got to be here. It's got to be stored up. It's got to be natural. And so it's that being a part of who you are. You can't learn that in school. You can't learn that in the classroom. The classroom could give you a philosophical understanding, but you're going to have to think about that philosophical principle over and over and over again. And in order for it to really, really be true, it's got to be tested. Like the concept of God is love, or, in a knowledge of God, all true knowledge and real, development have their source. That's got to be a tested thesis, right? In big or in small ways, it's got to be tested. That process of finding that statement to be true and impacting your life, it's going to take a long, long time. For me, 20 years plus. But what I learned in one summer canvassing, 10, 15, 20, 100 doors,
wow.
It bypassed all of that philosophy. It bypassed all of that. Let me focus on subject directly to, I need to change this.
So you really put in those 10,000 hours.
Yeah. I mean, that's 10,000 hours in 100 of canvassing, right?
Wow.
I mean, it's the value. And look, I don't like canvassing. I mean, I hate it. Every summer I did it,
How do you push through that if you hate something, but you got to do it? You just do
friends
it.
were doing it. I mean, there's a lot of things, friends were doing it. I loved other components of it, not going door outside of going door to door was good.
Outside of the main thing, it was good.
Yeah. So there were a lot of different elements. I was young when I did it, so I had more like umph to me, you know. So there were so many other elements that kind of, I was very fortunate within that context for me. You know, I still had, I had a little more drive in me and so forth, and I was not doing it for what I'm saying now. All of this is late discovery. You know, I work now, and in the work that I do now, I have to fundraise.
Yeah, it's fundraise.
You know, I have to fundraise for the work that I do now. Probably one of the most critical components of my job description, fundraising.
Wow.
And
that's all interpersonal skills.
And all of that is, foundation is canvassing. I have to call people. Canvassing, so many lessons. It gives you the ability to reinvent yourself every single door.
Wow.
You know, the second door does not know what you did in the first door. They don't know the canvasser of the first door. They don't know what you did there. They're seeing you. You can like whatever mistake you made, you can immediately change and grow and do it the second door.
It's like a mini restoration that God does in our lives.
Over and over and over.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah. So you have that cold calling, you know, in a business perspective is critical. I mean, even people that are millionaires are going to make people cold call. I mean, the most successful people in business all had to do sales.
Wow.
You know, now the thing about canvassing is that sales is just a byproduct. You're spreading the message.
Yeah.
So with that message, you have the attendance of God being by your
full
side.
Package.
Yeah. And so now that's a valuable tool. The fact that you know that God can be by your side when you're selling something. If he's by your side when you're selling a book, he can be by your side when you're asking for money to help your ministry.
Wow.
You know, so you can call that business partner again and say, God, I need you. I don't want to call this person, but I have to, and I have to ask him for money. And it's a valuable relationship, valuable experience.
We really appreciate having you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I'll definitely re-listen to that, take some of the lessons to heart, take all the lessons to heart and jot down notes and really focus on the Lord, not doing something great, but doing something good for the Lord Jesus. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure.